Hello, fellow nerds and book lovers. Welcome back to Ridcully's book review. I'm Ridcully. Today we're going to be going over the second book in the Rebel Fleet series. This was another good book, but it's not as good as the original Rebel Fleet, book one. It's got some logistical problems, it's got some conveniences, it's got a few plot holes. It felt like it was a little bit more rushed. Hopefully it's because he had a big contract and was getting a big check and he had a time constraint to get it done. So it wasn't as refined as book one, but it's still a pretty good book. Still has a pretty good story. The plot holes are minimal. I mean, it's still 10 times better than Robert Jordan's last books, or 100 times better than anything Ryan Johnson would ever be able to read, and 1,000 times better than anything he'd be able to write. So it's still a good book. It's worth reading, it's worth getting. I am going to touch base on one thing before I go into the spoilers. That is a bit of a spoiler. It's about bourbon and how it's used in the book. And so if you don't want to hear this rant for the next 4 minutes, just skip ahead 4 or 5 minutes into the future, and that'll probably be where I go into the book without the spoilers. Right at the start of the book, he runs into a reporter named Robin. And one of the phrases that he says in the book is that Robin liked bourbon. And everything between Jim Beam and Wild Turkey, she really knew her stuff. Whiskey, Tango, Foxtrot? Seriously? Everything between Jim Beam and Wild Turkey? Now, Jim Beam, you're probably right on the low end. Wild Turkey? Are you kidding me? I mean, you would have probably been safe going with Blanton's. I mean, yeah, it's arguable. You know, there's about 10 you could have went with, but Blanton's would probably be your safest. You could have went with Elmer T. Lee, Booker's, Noah's Mill, Willet Pot. I mean, if you could have worked into the story somehow that she maybe had a bottle of 18-year-old Elijah Craig hidden under her law school books in her footlocker because she was afraid that her spouse would find out she had a $190 bottle of bourbon. You know, that would have gave her a little bit of credibility. But Wild Turkey? Come on. I about quit reading the book right then and there. After I raged for a few minutes, I was able to sit back down, ignore it. I'll give him that one, but that's his only one. So, all right, rant over. From this point on, I'm going to continue with the spoilers, and we'll go through my notes and talk about some of the plot points, some of the things I liked, some of the things I didn't like. When, at the first of the book, there's Robin the reporter, and she gets picked up with Blake when they're taken back to be debriefed at the base. And she gets sent out of the room, but she conveniently leaves her purse. And as she leaves the room, she's swinging her hips, trying to distract everybody. I thought that was clever. I thought that was funny. I thought that was good writing. And then it was even better as Blake, so when she gets out of the room, walks over to her purse, opens it up, pulls out her cell phone and turns it off. You know, she had been trying to cause a distraction, left her purse to record the conversation. Really well done. And then it's even better because after their conversation gets done, the guards bring her in and she's sitting there with a listening device. And then they go over and look at her purse and there's a second device in there. So, you know, she had been smart enough, clever enough. It set her up as a good scene, set her up as a smart character, as an interesting character, believable where she's a reporter. That part was really good. Earth has built a ship of their own. They've cannibalized some of the parts from the Hammerhead. They've got, they have a scientist named Abrams, cool name, that is a super genius that has been able to reverse engineer a lot of the stuff from the Hammerhead ship and implement it into the new tech for the Earth ship. They get, you know, in the interview, they find out that there's this new ship and Blake wants, you know, to go on. And Abram says, no, you were way too irresponsible. You were way too irresponsible in your last mission to be allowed to be a part of this new crew for this new ship. I'm in control. So it sets him up as a complete asshat. Very believable. And then the impressive thing is, through the book, he's consistent. I don't know if asshats are just so easy to write because there's so many of them that we have on Earth, or if this particular case, you know, B.V. Larson was just really good at it. But he is consistent all the way through the book. Earth goes for phase ships. The phase ship that we learned in the first book is a stealth ship. It can actually go into a pocket of warp space and pretty much become invisible. They can still be shot if you can find them, but because they're in this pocket, they wrap two different realities around them and they're really hard to find. The Earth decides to go for these ships. Apparently they have some restrictions that aren't really explained really well. That brings up some questions. The rebel fleet hates them. They're the sneaky ship, they're the assassin, they're the sniper. They've made it a point of honor to not use them. I don't know why. I guess it's just the horde mentality. Somewhat believable. Throughout human history, snipers are probably the best example. Every time that there was a conflict, usually the sides historically didn't have snipers. They quickly developed them during the battle. They were hated and loathed on both sides of the conflict as cowardly. I mean, that's kind of the position of the phase ship. But the example, the parallel that really jumps out to mind, and he even explains it in the books, is like the German U-boats. At the end of World War II, Germany didn't have the money to build big, huge Bismarck-type battleships anymore. So they opted for what was the extremely cheap option, which is the U-boats. Something sneaky, something stealthy, something cheap, but yet still something that was quite dangerous and quite powerful. And that's kind of the position of the phase ships in the book. Really well done, really well written. Blake's at the base. He's supposed to be part of the new team with Abrams. He's wormed his way in now that he's found out that there's a ship. And then he senses that somebody's sneaking into his room. Well, as soon as they sneak in, they go to attack him. He's aware of them, and he fights them, and it turns out that it's Commander Urson from the Hunter. And he's just like, why did you attack me? She's just like, no human would be able to tell. I knew that it would, if I attacked you and you was able to defend yourself, that only you would be able to. He's like, oh, that doesn't, I guess that makes sense, but stop it. So it was pretty cool. Urson shows up, she just walks into the base. He steps out, the guards are like standing right there. He's like, why did you let her in? The guards are like, she's an alien. She does whatever she wants. And she's a bear person. She doubly gets to do whatever she wants. Really well-written scene, really fun scene. Why aren't they asking the Kerr for tech? Yeah, this is something that I wondered about in the last book when they stole the ship. I wish it would explain it more, why it's so hard, why they didn't get any tech, when they couldn't get any more information. They didn't even try and steal some libraries or some technical manuals or an Encyclopedia Galactica from the Kerr to bring back to Earth. Basically, all they brought back was what was on the ship. I mean, that was quite a bit, and that was cool, but I wish that they would have explained why they didn't get more, or, you know, showed them attempting to get more technology. Urson shows up, and she says that the Imperials are back. It's not going to be 1,000 years before the next war. They're being reactivated. And they pretty well demand that Blake captain the new ship and come up. Well, this really pisses off Abrams and everybody that was running the new program, because they had decided they did not want Blake even associated with the ship, and Urson demands that they come up and be part of the new ship. And basically, the old crew from the old Hammerhead is the leader, and Blake is the leader of the ship, and they come back to fight. Which is cool, which is reasonable, but they grab the other crew and throw them on the ship, and you have the quintessential, nobody can be cool about it. The new crew has to be complete dicks. Whether they've been conditioned to, whether they were chosen to be is never explained, they just automatically are. It's a little old, it's a little cliche. I guess it's easy writing, makes for conflict, makes for fun. Wish it would have went a different direction, or a little bit more a little bit more backstory, but what do you do? Well, they get up to the hunter and they pull both crews in, and it's obvious that there's two different crews. They're all not under Blake. And Urson says, you know, we usually wouldn't do this, but where there's a conflict, we have to decide it rebel style. And the new crew should have kind of seen what was happening. They had been briefed, they had read. And so Urson says, she turns to Gwen and she says, you know, we'll start doing a couple of you at a time. Gwen, who is the captain? And Gwen looks around, and apparently the Sims get turned on at this point, because the old crew with their Sims just become enraged. And Gwen said, Blake's the captain. And she smashes one of the new crew, beats them down. A brawl ensues in which the old crew, because they have Sims, beat the new crew down, and that's decided rebel style who the captain is, who the crew is going to be for the ship. Really cool, really well done. I loved it. One of the cool things about it is Miller, even though he didn't have a Sim, turned out to be a hard fight for Blake because he was much more skilled than Blake. That's also something cool, something believable, something you would expect from a Special Forces captain, somebody that had been chosen to lead the new ship. Next thing on my notes is, how had the Sims not been released throughout Earth? That was something that I wondered. The Sims are basically nanites, and they can be transferred with blood, they can be transferred with spit, they can be transferred with sex. They're almost kind of an STD, but one that was actually beneficial. How they haven't spread through humanity never was explained. That kind of bothered me. I would have expected them to be. Yeah, I would expect them to also, where they also have healing properties, I would have expected humanity to have embraced them and demanded that everybody on Earth, you would want it. I mean, it's basically the key to immortality, to regeneration, to living forever. Stronger, faster, smarter. It's everything that medical science has been trying to achieve for thousands of years. And it doesn't spread throughout humanity. I thought that that was a failed point in the story that should have been addressed. They get on the ship, and one of the big failings of the New Earth tech, the ship that they'd built, is they didn't have anti-gravity. And that was one of the reasons why I was like, why aren't you begging for new technology? And Commander Urson gives them an anti-gravity machine. So check that off. That was one of the good things. One of the things that really, to have and be able to fight in space, you would have to have. It's something that would make it so you could withstand and survive the G-forces. Even after the conflict, it's quite apparent that Miller does not accept Blake. He's insubordinate. Obviously, he's trying to undermine Blake's authority. You can't have that. Not with a captain of a ship. Not with somebody so close in their chain of command. If I was in Blake's position, I would have sent him back to Earth. If we were incapable of that, I would have made sure to put him in some position where he wouldn't ever have came on the bridge. I would definitely try and neuter all power and all possibility that he would ever have to conflict with me as a captain. Blake knows this, and he doesn't. They should have explained why he doesn't. Honestly, if I had somebody that dangerous, somebody that might try a mutiny, especially somebody that hopefully wouldn't be dumb enough to do it during a battle, but that might, which would be the most dangerous time and the most opportunistic time, I'd kill him. You know, Miller would have to go one way or another. Standing or feet first, Miller would have to go. I don't like that he kept him, at least without giving a really good reason why he kept him and kept him on the bridge in a position of power. They're into their first conflict, and they stay out of phase. And this is some of the tactical problems that I have throughout the book. It is two of the major ones. Why doesn't the fleet use the rifts in battle? You know, they can make short rifts across the solar system. At least it's never established that they can't, and yet they never do. They have these big, long, Last Jedi stupid chases when short rifts would make so much more sense. Mobility is one of the key factors on a battlefield, and it's being ignored in this book, where they have this ability to jump. You know, why don't they use it? That bugged me. And then the fact that none of the other ships, I mean, the Hammerhead has some serious problems. It's constantly not being able to have shields and shoot and fade in and out. It has a huge power supply problem, where there's only one of them in the entire Rebel Alliance, and it's a prototype. I can forgive that. But future ships, future ship designs, they should be bigger. They should have an abundance of power. You want something that can fade in, shoot, fade out. If it's got to be completely independent systems, yeah. If you got something that fades in, has to wait to shoot, it's going to be destroyed. You know, bad logic, bad tactics. It's a prototype, so it can be forgiven. I hope to see even better logic and better tactics in future books with future ships. Why not shoot the other carrier when running? Keep up the scare. Keep up the scare was a phrase that Bedford Forrest used in the Civil War. Horrible person, brilliant general. He would have inferior forces all the time, and one of the things that he learned, one of the things that modern militaries learn from him, is that if you can get your opponent running, you don't let them go. You keep going. You defeat them in detail. You pick off stragglers. You keep on them. And Blake, when he has the last of the opponent's carriers in the one part of the book running, they say, should we shoot them? Should we have a clear shot? We have this advantage, and he lets them go. I thought that was weak. I thought that was bad tactics. I didn't like to see that from Blake. And later on, when Urson comes and talks to him about it, Blake was kind of, he gave the answers that everything that he did was for self-preservation and for cowardice, and she demotes him for it, takes points away. I thought that was pretty cool. I thought it was pretty cool because of the horde mentality, they would take points away. But I also thought it was pretty cool that she came and asked him, and she was smart enough to try and figure out, you know, why did you do these actions? Why didn't you finish that off? Do you have a good reason? That was a pretty cool part of the book. The Griffs ambush Blake at the lift. When Blake heads on they get pulled to the battle station. And these Griffs are basically like Planet of the Ape men, is the way I took them. Now, they called them Griffs, so in my mind, I instantly went to Biff from Back to the Future. I have no idea if that was meant to be the personality correlation, but they were cheap shot pulling bullies and jerks. It reminded me of the Biff character. It seems like the entire race, that's what they were based on. But they come, they're going to beat him up, and he pulls out his weapon, and he says, well, I'm going to shoot you. And they're all like, you can't shoot us. It's not against the rules. Your weapon doesn't work. And he's like, I had mine altered. And he's got a reputation for having cheated enough in battle and within the rebel fleet that they believe him and they go away. And Shaw, his commander, comes over and says, I'm going to have your weapon. You can't have a live weapon. And he's like, no, I was lying. And Shaw's just like, you were lying, you cheating bastard. And he docks him points. I thought that was cool. I thought that played into the different mentalities of the crews, of the ships, of Blake. Blake was just like, I don't care. Take all the points you want. I got out of a beating. Really well done. Really well-written scene. It built Blake up as a good character. It was consistent with Shaw, consistent with the story. We find out when they get back that the Imperials have invaded, they've been reactivated, and the entire Rebel fleet was disbanded because the Imperials only attack once every 1,000 years. But yet they knew it was something. I didn't like this part. I thought that was stupid. It was a horde mentality, so you can actually see it. You know, the first time they didn't show up for a year, good enough, everybody disband. Actually very believable, but it's irritating that it didn't appear that there was anybody that was smart enough to say, no, we did things different this time. We attacked them harder. We pissed them off. We really ought to keep the fleet around for a little bit longer, try and keep it back together. I was disappointed in that part on the logistics, but it still fit in with the personalities and the established thinking and the established way that the history had been going in this book. World's whining they have to fight genocide. And when they call up everybody, all types of worlds are not wanting to come. They're dragging their feet. They don't want to send their ships. They're upset that the Imperials have came and they're going around destroying entire planets. And they don't feel like they have to fight. The injustice and the stupidity of it makes you think, that is so moronic. And then if you think about it, it's so true. Every conflict, even with genocide, there are groups, there's sections of society, there's individual people that won't fight. Whether they're pacifists, whether they're cowards, whether they're honorable, whether they're stupid, whatever reason you want to give them, there's sections that won't do it. Personally, if it's genocide, I think it's stupidity not to go and fight. You know, if it's an individual choice, I guess that's a completely different level than as a nation or as a culture. But entire planets that won't send their military ships that they had before, you know, I can't even see a moral decision there. They're not wanting to send the military that they already had that had been fighting. You know, why? You know, somebody else go and fight before we get genocided? Yeah. Believable, well written. You hate the rebel cur. Almost hit a little too close to home on that one. Gru tells him Imperials are back to kill humans. Awesome. Robin goes to a bar to find out information, and there's one of these griffs named Gru at the bar, and she's pumping him for information, and we find out that the griffs, under Admiral Feck's instruction, have told the Imperials that the humans are here on the station. And the Imperials are pissed because it was Blake and it was the humans that beat them in the last conflict. And then they've been backstabbed. They've been betrayed by Admiral Feck. He's sending them out to get killed, hoping that will appease the Imperials. Historically accurate, fits in with human nature, with believability, well written. Though, once I found that out, I would be so gone from that station and so far away from Admiral Feck. How could you possibly fight or even be close to a person that you knew had sent you off to be killed without any honorable reason? You can see the logic in it, but if you were the sacrificial lamb, you definitely wouldn't go back to the butchers. Imperials will know Blake is the only one who would dare drive a phase ship. There is some kind of debate on how would the Imperials know where Blake is. And the answer is everybody just almost looks dumbfounded at Blake. The Imperials know that there's only one person in the galaxy on our side that would have a phase ship. That would be humans, and that would be you. I thought that was clever. I thought that was funny. And because of that, you can see that it would have been smarter for Blake to have just ran. Instead of fighting to get back on board the ship, he should have just went with them trying to get rid of him and ran like hell and not came back. Because it makes sense that the Imperials would want his blood. He's setting himself up to be the biggest target in the universe. The Imperial ship shows up, and it shows up unexpectedly at the battle station. And they pull away and then they phase out to try and go and fight this. And Feck is mad. Feck had set things up so that the ship would be separate and Blake would be on the battle station when the ship showed up. But because of the information Robin had got, they were a little bit more prepared and they were able to get away from the battle station and actually get into the fight. When this happens, there's a part that says, you know, everybody was supposed to sleep on the ship, but there's some people still on the station, and one of the people that they say is on the station is Samson. And then in the fight, Samson's there working at his station. Small plot hole, but it was irritating. You established that Samson was on the battle station. Now he's at his station in the fight. The book was a little bit rushed, had a couple of little plot holes, a couple of writing errors like that in it. Why Dalton says Samson is wetting himself not to listen. The next part that I didn't really like was Samson was trying to get Blake's attention. Dalton turns around and mocks him. They're in the middle of a battle. Samson has pertinent information for the battle. And Dalton makes fun of him. It was just out of character. It didn't make sense. Didn't push the story along. It was actually pulled you out of the story. It was a little bit confusing. Didn't really like that part. Miller going outside battle station range. Awesome. You know, they found out that Fex is trying to kill him, has betrayed him, and is trying to turn him over to the Imperials, wants him dead, hoping their death will appease the Imperials. Miller knows this, and so it actually shows a good reason why Miller was on the bridge. Like I said before, I would have never had Miller on the bridge unless he had to be, unless I had no other choice. I mean, it's obvious that he's trying to usurp Blake's authority, and he has enough, if he has enough power and enough crew members, he's going to take authority if he needs to. But this is a good case where he was smart and Blake was kind of dumb. That he pulls outside of the range where the battle station will be effective for the fight, so the battle station can accidentally kill him. That was a good part. I liked that. When they go out to fight the other phase ship, the Imperial phase ship that came into the system, they're both in phase, so they can actually fire upon each other. Well, I guess you can fire upon each other. That might have been another plot hole. I'd have to go and look at that. They're phased in when they fire on the other ship. For some reason, they can see the other ship when it's phased in their phase. So they must be in the same galaxy, the same reality as each other. Whatever the logistics is behind it, they fire on the other phase ship, and the blowback from firing, the screens apparently let enough radiation in that it damn near kills almost everybody on the bridge. Knocks a lot of people out, hurts a lot of people. It's an interesting concept that the screens that are looking at the outside, you know, come to think of it, no, that's not right, because it explains that the screens are really just big televisions using an optic lens to outside. That was explained in the other book. So that the radiation comes through the screens, that doesn't really make sense now that I think about it. Yeah, that's the part that I don't like now. No, it doesn't stand up to a little bit of study. But for whatever reason, the screens cause the leakage, the radiation onto the bridge that almost kills everybody. And when Blake is being knocked out, he thinks the other ship has hit him because he hasn't given the order to fire. But he had clearly told Miller, you know, shoot that other ship, destroy that other ship. So he had given the order. I don't know why he's thinking that he hadn't. It was a convenience in the plot, convenience to move the story along, some kind of moment of dread in his own mind, some moment of confusion. It can be explained away, but it really didn't work. Wasn't that good of a part. Miller would never have left his post. When everybody's knocked out and a lot of people are dead, well, I think two crewmates did die. Fortuitously, they were both of the new crew that was trying to usurp Blake. But Miller was hauling people to the infirmary. And Blake calls him in and demotes him. Takes his position away because he left the bridge when Miller was unconscious, and the captain can never leave the bridge of the ship. I mean, that's ingrained, ancient. I mean, that's just the rules. Miller, it doesn't really, I don't know if it says he's special forces or not, but he's hardcore military. He would have never left the bridge. So that was a convenience. It doesn't really follow tradition, doesn't really make sense with the characters who were written into the book. That part gets a thumbs down. Not confronting Feck. Yeah, when they get back, they know, they have information that Admiral Feck has betrayed him, and they don't confront him. Personally, I would never go back within range of that battle station. Feck is now an enemy. You know, that they go back and then they don't confront him, I didn't like that part. I mean, it has a little bit of the horde mentality. You just walk into danger. That's just the way it is. You live with it. No. I mean, I'd have to have some huge reasons to ever go back within range of that battle station with Feck controlling it. Though, on the other hand, they are under Feck's authority, and the rest of the rebel fleet really doesn't give a damn. So I guess if your life is going to be sacrificed to save your home planet, you just got to you have to put up with it. So I guess there is reason why they would go back. I still would have found every excuse I had and broke my own radio not to go back, though. So if I wasn't able to kill him in the first attempt by telling the phase ship, telling the Imperials where they were going to be so the Imperials could do it. So he sends them on a suicide mission. And Blake can't go alone. The ship doesn't have the ability to form a wormhole, a rift. So he sends the Hunter and Blake on a suicide mission to kill basically the Imperial. It leaves, at this point, you think that they have this new ship called a Hunter. And it's a planet eater. It says the thing's 100 miles long. And the amount of time that it goes through a planet isn't logical if it's only 100 miles long, but we'll ignore it. It's established that it's a planet killer. Supposedly it's an Imperial ship. The thing is it's a ship that's 100 miles long. Even if it isn't, the logistics of it being a planet killer and destroying planets in the time periods that he has it do it in the book is unrealistic. It's still a behemoth of a ship, a huge ship that, their ships, one carrier and one little phase ship, something like a torpedo boat, just wouldn't ever be able to take on. But it has that Urson is fatalistic, and depressed. And the character of Urson up through the story has just been a berserker. Literally, her race is based on bears. Literally, she's a berserker. To have her all of a sudden be depressed and fatalistic just didn't work. It wasn't true to character. Blake does go, and he does a recon mission into the other system where the Hunter is at. And it turns out that one of the major reasons why Blake is willing to go on this suicide mission is because the Hunter is destroying the system of Raw, where Mia's from, the cat people. And Mia was Blake's lover and friend from the first book. So it puts a personal reason for Blake to go into the story. Sets it up really well, kind of a convenience at the same time, but one or two conveniences are okay. It worked. But instead of just going and suicidal, charging this behemoth of a ship to be destroyed like Feck wants him to, he does a recon mission first. Feck throws a fit, but screw Feck. But they find out through different machinations through the book that, and fighting some of the ships in this other system, that these ships, the Imperial ships, aren't being attacked by this machine because they have some kind of gravity signal, that they're altering the gravity in their ships in a pattern that makes the ship ignore it. Which also brings up the first questions of why are these ships doing this? If that's an Imperial ship, why can't they just say, you're on our side? It explains that the ship is an AI, so they might, the Imperials have either lost control or the AI somehow makes it so that they have to trick it or lead it. It's like a big dumb dog. A little bit odd. It starts to bring up some questions of what is this Hunter? What is this huge ship doing? But they get the scientist Abrams, who was a jerk all the way through the books. They were consistent with him. To figure out how to use their own gravitational machine on their ship, their anti-gravity machine, to send out the same pulses. Well, Abrams, is able to record the signal that the Imperial ships are making, programs the machine. When they turn it on, it about kills everybody again. It's a second huge accident. And Abrams, when they get the machine turned off, it does some kind. There's a couple more little plot holes because the story is that it wasn't really the gravity waves that were ripping the ship apart from their gravity machine. It's their symbiotes that they have in their bodies. The gravity waves just made them nuts. So their Sims were attacking themselves and knocking them unconscious and destroying their organs. But then in a couple other paragraphs, it says they were going around looking for warping in the ship. Like the gravity machine actually, in performing this signal, was destroying the ship, not just the people in it, not just telling the Sims and making them nuts. So a little bit of a plot hole there, a little bit of an inconsistency in the storyline. Good idea, good concept, screwed up on the logistics of it. Accidentally kicks Abrams. When they did the accident, Abrams was the scientist that had programmed it, and he's one of the people that is unconscious on the bridge. And Blake accidentally, when he's wandering around the bridge, kicks Abrams, and Dalton just starts busting up saying, "Kick him again for me." That was in character. That was a really funny part. Nobody phased out. During this accident, when they're trying to test it to see if this hunter is going to come after them, you know, they've turned the gravity signal off. They still have an Imperial ship in the system. They still have the hunter in the system. And they're all recovering, and they do a bunch of dialogue. They do a bunch of actions. They're going to the infirmary. And then all of a sudden they realize nobody's phased the ship out. You know, these other ships are coming to destroy them, and they're just sitting there in the open. You know, and it sets up to a dangerous situation where they're about to be destroyed. And it was just like, yeah, no. As soon as anybody was conscious on that bridge or around, I mean, it tries to imply they were so shaken up that everybody forgot about it. And it's within their realm of believability of one or two people. But somebody on that bridge would know and be aware enough still to know that if you're not phased in if you're not phased out in a phase ship, you're vulnerable. You know, these other ships are just going to blow you out of space. So that they forgot was a convenience, a little bit irritating. Hunter came after with the first failed test. Then 1 second, Blake said, must be giving her the right signal. Here was another inconsistency. After the first time that they failed the test, the hunter was coming after them. They phase out and get away. The hunter goes back to eating the planet. And then they phase back in and they do a 1 second test, and the hunter just keeps eating the planet. It doesn't really explain why this time the hunter was ignoring them. Blake saying we did a 1 second test, so that must be why the hunter's ignoring us. We sent out a signal for 1 second, or we did a signal before, but when they did the signal before and turned it off, they came after him. So why the hunter doesn't come this time when they come back in a normal space, that was an inconsistency. Don't understand why that happened the way it did. After the first fail, Abrams complains that nobody trusts him. Well, they were consistent with Abrams. Abrams, a glory hog, a Napoleon, a little man syndrome. If he doesn't get praise and he doesn't get his ego stroked all the time, he gets petulant, he gets snarky. Well, he's always an asshat. But if he isn't constantly getting praise, and when he comes to the second test, they go to do it in increments, and he complains that nobody trusts him after he's about killed everybody on the ship with a failed first attempt. Somebody should have kicked him. Well, it turns out that the last opposing cruiser that they're fighting in this system has Lael. The old antagonist from the first book is the captain of this ship. She believes Blake's chasing her on purpose and saved her for last and a couple other things that were conveniences, but it causes surprise, and it's written into the book as surprise. So it worked out really well. And she warns them that to use these signals, to use these gravity signals is a crime. They're like, we're at war, you're trying to kill us. What more of a crime could it be? And she says, because you've committed this crime, now we're going to come and destroy Earth. And you know, it's that part of it has been kind of bugging me through all the books. It's just like, if the Imperials are using all of the Kerr as punching bags, and one Kerr race, the humans, turned out to be an actual real opponent or an aggressive opponent, or just plain irritated them a little bit more than the other ones. Pettiness, small-mindedness, egos, I mean, take your pick, they would come and destroy Earth. And now she's threatening to come and destroy Earth. It really creates an interesting dichotomy. You know, do you fight and try and win? Or are they so much more powerful that if you fight and you actually show promise or actually are able to hurt them, they're going to turn around and kill you? She's promising to do that. That really well written. I liked that part. I liked that storyline. Blake irritates her and challenges her. And she accepts the challenge by way of a champion, kind of like a trial by combat, the wild cur, the horde cur use constantly. And it seems to have some tradition in the Imperials, or else the Imperials are willing to acknowledge it. So he flies the pod into her ship. Well, he's about to challenge and fight, and he's basically stalling because on the pod, they've installed some kind of signal device that's going to mess up the Imperial ship's gravity waves, so it's sending the wrong signal. Clever, worth a try, worth the sacrifice. You know, I would, a little bit of a convenience that the Imperials wouldn't expect the pod to be some kind of weapon and get rid of it, or else even when it starts a signal, they wouldn't be able to tell that it was sending a signal. A couple questions there on why it works, but it's definitely worth a try. Well, during all of this fighting, the rebel fleet shows up to take on the Hunter. And they all just line up and decide to go and give it a shot. Well, Blake and his crew has already found out that they've got this gravitation machine that can send a signal that will get the Hunter to ignore you. The very least is they could line up everybody really close at point blank range and all get a really good one volley in before the Hunter, fought back at all. It irritated me that they just line up and they start firing it before using any brains, but it is supposed to be a wild horde mentality. Irritating that they're not smarter, believable. It works. Blake and the trick with the pod actually worked. The Hunter destroys Lyell's cruiser, and Blake and Lyell are like the only, everybody else fights on the cruiser, which isn't really true to the characters of the Imperials. You would think that a lot of them would have tried to run away because it paints them as cowards. But apparently Lyell is the only coward on this particular cruiser. She gets in an escape pod and gets away. Blake and I think it was Samson get another escape pod and get away. And they capture Lyell. So that was pretty cool. And they capture Lyell and they get her back to the ship. And he gets her drunk. He's trying to interrogate her with alcohol, getting her drunk. Once she gets drunk, it's the traditional of now you must pleasure me with your sexual prowess. And Blake won't do it because it's immoral and he's kind of disgusted by her because she is a horrible person. And that's cool and it's true to Blake's nature. On the other hand, if sleeping with her and getting her more drunk and continuing to spend time with her would have got more information that might have saved your entire race, several races of the entire rebel fleet, the entire alliance, the smart thing would have probably been to keep her drunk, get her even drunker, go ahead and sleep with her, pillow talk. I mean, Ash Williams would have, but then Ash Williams would have for a pack of M&Ms. So I guess that doesn't really matter, but it would have been a smart thing to do for him to keep it up. It establishes that the Hunter, when it goes through a planet, it leaves just basically an asteroid ring where the planet used to be. But 10% of the mass of the planet is always missing from the ring. You were expecting some kind of reason why, where was this 10% of every planet's mass that it goes through? And in the fight, it starts growing. It has its weaponry are basically these huge missiles that from afar look like big spines, but they're huge missiles. And they're MIRVs. Once they get out there, they break apart into thousands of other missiles and attack the ships. And these spines are the 10% of each planet's mass. A ship that's 100 miles long, and it takes 10% of every planet's mass that it destroys and turns them into missiles. Yeah, not very good math there. Why didn't the giraffe people turn off the machine? The system that they were fighting the Hunter in, the last system that they were fighting the Hunter in, had these giraffe people. They had long necks, so they called them giraffe people. And they'd given the giraffe people one of these, a larger module, gravity module, so it could send the signal out to protect the planet. Well, when the fleet shows up, Blake tries to help the fleet, tries to distract the Hunter by using his ship with a signal to attack it, well, it reprograms the ship. And that part was actually pretty cool. The hunter actually turns on him. He barely gets away, but now because he was using the signal and attacked the hunter is now programmed to attack things, giving off that signal. So after the battle's over and the hunter can't find any more ships to attack, he turns and the planet's giving off with the draft people is giving off this signal. And he starts heading towards the planet. They can communicate with these people. These people have already communicated with them. They've figured out that the machine is now reprogrammed because it's heading directly for the planet that was protected before the battle. Why didn't they just radio them and tell them to turn the machine off? I didn't quite get that part. That was a logistic part. To me, that was a plot hole that needed to be fixed. Why would scatter ever matter? Yeah, this was another thing that always bugged me. Through the book, they keep saying, if we go through and we make the miscalculations or make a long jump, sometimes we'll scatter and we could be lost forever. They've established that they pretty well have telescopes and they have maps of the entire galaxy, and there's lots of different stars in the galaxy which are huge. And these stars are used as beacons for their jumps. How would you ever really scatter? These stars aren't going to disappear. I mean, unless you threw yourself into another galaxy or somewhere where you couldn't find the entire Milky Way galaxy. But they never indicate that that's even a possibility. They keep saying that they can get lost somewhere in the galaxy. But how would you get lost in the galaxy as long as you could just reprogram the ship to jump to one of these stars and get back on track? I don't understand what the whole fear of scatter is. Why not use the rifts in combat? And that's another thing. Mobility is one of the kings of combat. The Marginal Wall in France was pretty well the last fortification that was attempted in modern warfare here on Earth. And it would be even more useless to do a fortification in space. Yeah, they have the battle stations because they're cool and the Death Star and yada, yada, yada. But the reality of it is a fortification, a non-mobile fortification, is nowhere near as valuable as mobile offensive weaponry. And they have the ability to create short rifts. At least they never don't say that they don't, and they never use them. They never use them to jump across the solar system or in battle to get closer, to get away from something. I don't understand why. I think it's a lack of the logistics and the tactics in the book. Well, Blake has an idea how he's going to save the giraffe people. And basically, he gets the hunter pissed off and chasing his ship again. So it turns away from the planet, which brings up another logistical point. It says that this hunter, for as powerful as it is still slow. If you piss it off, it'll chase you. Either the Imperials or the Rebels really shouldn't lose any planets to this hunter then. All it would take is a few ships sending long-range missiles, throwing rocks at it, you know, putting up cat videos, whatever it takes to piss this hunter off to chase them, and they could just stay in front of it indefinitely. Or at least it really needs to explain why they couldn't stay in front of it indefinitely. But this is somewhat the tactic that he uses to save the giraffe people. He pisses the hunter off, and then he goes and he gets Ursan to open up a rift, and he's brought her into the plan and to get the hunter to follow. And then there's a weird part where the hunter decides that it can't catch it, so it's going to turn around. So he throws the gravity machine sending the signal out the door. Not really sure why they did this. Not really sure why it's important. I guess it was so that the hunter would see that it was still there and then come after him. But they head through the rift. You know, I guess it never explains it. If that machine is going to keep make the hunter think the ship is still there, come look around, and then the rift is supposed to be still open there, and it comes through. It's so big, I'm not sure why it could come through. If it can open up the rift wider, if it can see through and open its own rift. It doesn't explain any of the logistics of why they kick their gravity machine out before they follow through the rift. I just didn't quite get that part. Well, it turns out that it was kind of a cool plan, though. He got Ursan to open up a rift back into Imperial space. Back into where they have some of their populated planets. And the hunter does follow. Like I said, it doesn't really explain how it followed or why it followed, but it does. It follows them into the Imperial space, which is a cool concept, because now this hunter has been reprogrammed to attack the planets and the ships that are sending out the signal that used to make it ignore them. So that part of the plan, that logic, could have been explained, could have been executed a little bit better, but it is a cool idea, cool story. I did like that part. But they get back there, and the Imperial fleet's coming after them, and the Imperial ships are starting to come, and they're coming after the hunter, and they're coming after Blake and his ship. And it doesn't really explain why the Imperials, now that the hunter has shown up in their system, why they keep coming after Blake and Killer. You know, two ships that come into their home territory, relatively, you know, pathetic and weak opponents, really can't realistically do much. And yet this hunter that can destroy planets and do some serious damage, why they're paying attention and they come after Urson and Blake and their crews. I guess it can be inferred that the Imperials see the hunter, but they know that they have signals that'll protect against it, so they're ignoring it and just coming after Blake, and they'll take care of the hunter later. I mean, that's what I inferred from the story, but it never really explained it. You know, I wish it would have explained it, because in my mind, you know, the hunter isn't supposed to be back in their system. It showing up should have scared the bejeebies out of them, and I would have thought they would have dealt with the hunter first, or at least everybody got their signals turned on before they came after Blake. But for whatever reason, the hunter's just coming around, looking around, and the Imperials are coming after Blake, coming after Killer. So Blake says to turn the gravity machine on, the friend or foe gravity machine back on. And we had just, in the last chapter, went through him leaving their gravity machine for the hunter to come and follow him through the rift. And now he's turning on the machine that he left back in the other solar system on. Pretty sure that was a huge plot hole, screwed up writing. The book feels like it was hurried in a few parts, where he lost track of his logistics. He lost track of, you know, where everybody and where everything was. Forgivable. I guess we'll just assume that he had another prototype that, even though Dr. Abrams had said this is the last one, he went and looked and, oh, they did have another one. Blake keeps antagonizing Urson. Kind of a dick move. Yeah, several times through the book, Blake, he basically calls Urson a coward to get her to go and do what he wants her to do. And it's not really clever manipulating, it's childhood playground manipulating. And Urson has already shown herself to be a fairly intelligent creature several times, and a true friend. Kind of a dick move. I didn't like that Blake was doing that several times through the book. But anyway, they turn on the spare machine that they'd forgot about, and so the hunter turns and comes after them. The Imperial fleet sees that the hunter's coming in their general area, so they all turn their friend or foes on. Blake turns his off and gets the hell out of there, and the hunter attacks the Imperial fleet. So a little bit of convenience, a little bit of screw up in the logistics, but overall it was a really cool plot. Really good plan. I like the way it turned out. You know, the hunters attacking the Imperials, the planets, you know, they've really messed up the Imperial, you know, maybe the entire Empire. I mean, the Imperials, Lyell said that they could destroy a hunter, but, you know, at least this system is probably gone. Which, as far as vengeance against a superior enemy, might be a bad thing, but we'll leave that for the next book. Letting Lyell go. That would doom Earth. Stupid. Yeah, he puts Lyell in an escape pod and sends her out so that in theory, you know, she has her little control wand that sends out signals. She'll be picked up by an Imperial ship and saved. It's setting up that the enemy will be there for the next book, I guess, but it's still a stupid move. You know, now you're going to have a captain of a ship, and all she needs is one ship to pretty well come and destroy Earth's atmosphere, or throw rocks at it until it cracks the crust. You know, to destroy the Earth, it would not take that much. You know, and he sent the Imperial that hates Earth the most back to a position of power. I don't like it when, for the convenience of your story, you have your hero be that stupid. You know, I know it's traditional, but I'm a little disappointed that it didn't get a little bit better writing on that. When they get done, you know, and they sneak away and they get back to their home system, they've still got Feck. You know, he's betrayed them, he's backstabbed him, he tried to get him killed. They've done this great thing by leading the hunter away, or a horrible thing by antagonizing the Imperials even more by leading it back and attacking them. Either way, got some cool opportunities from stories coming up. But you still got to deal with Feck. Well, they go and they get the administrator, the doctor from the previous books, is now an ambassador, somebody really high up in the government, somebody that can remove Feck as admiral. And they go and they confront him, and as they get off onto the battle station to go and confront him with the administrator, all of the monkeys, all of the griffs that are usually just the grunts on the flight deck are now admirals and captains, so they have enough rank to attack, you know, the administrator for points. So that was kind of clever. That was that was smart. So they're in this fight and they finally win. Ursan's knocked out, so they head up to confront him, and he's locked in his room, and they're sitting there trying to get the door open, and finally the administrator says, 10 points whoever opens this door. And immediately the door opens and there's a turtle person saying there, I'll take my points. And he's like, were you holding the door shut? And he's like, it's not important, I want my points. That was a clever part, that was funny. You know, the turtle guys are both dicks, and yet you end up kind of liking them. They are comic relief, and they work very well in the book. Well, it turns out that Feck wasn't in his office. He was sneaking down around and taking over their ship. You know, I don't know if he knew that Ursan was there, or he just hoped that they would all be knocked out. But he's the admiral. He's got on their ship, and he's trying to make a getaway. He's turned off their communication, so they have to jump into the phase ship, which he couldn't have controlled because humans probably wouldn't have let him. But, you know, Killer, you know, they see him as an admiral, so he gets on it. They hop in the phase ship, they chase after him, they have to shoot the engine to get him stopped. They finally get him. He's demoted. And the part that I kind of don't like is they demote him and then they just make him a lieutenant, like in one of the machine shops on the battle station, leave him once again. It's the same as Lyell. Leaving a huge enemy at your back. Yeah, it makes for a continuation of the story. Cliche writing, kind of poor writing. It's been used, it's been overused in lots of books. I was expecting a little bit better of why he got away or how he kept alive. I mean, if I was Blake, I would be giving my points. I'd be putting out a bounty. I'd personally kill the bastard. I mean, especially somebody that you know is going to be gunning for you that's that powerful. If you have a chance, you don't leave an enemy like that at your back. A little disappointing, but I'll forgive it. Still a pretty good story. Still a fun read. Well, they get back and they find out that Blake gets attacked again, but he gets attacked by a being that's trying to erase his memories. Apparently, there's this one guy, I can't remember, Godwin, I think his name was. Everybody's forgotten about him. And Blake's, you know, every time he asks, everybody says, well, I'll check on that. Then he knocks him again, they can't remember. And he comes, he's got this little circlet, and Blake beats him. And he's just like, what are you doing, Godwin? Or, you know, who are you? We kind of find out that Godwin's a nomad. He's one of the race that built the hunter and sent it to kill the, you know, in revenge to kill the Imperials. And this is kind of a dick race. If the nomads are still around and they know that these hunters are going around eating planets and destroying, killing trillions of people, I really want an explanation as to why they're letting that happen. You know, have they lost control of the hunters? I mean, an explanation needs to be put in place there, or else the nomads are worse than the Imperials. You know, they gave the Imperials their supreme weapon that destroys planets, and they've been allowing them to use it to kill trillions of people. So I don't know if he just really didn't think that part of the story out, but the nomads are like the uber dicks. You know, I want them all dead if they could control these hunters and they weren't doing it. You know, we need an explanation as to why the nomads are still around, and yet the hunters have been allowed to run the rampage that they have through the galaxy. Well, thanks for listening to this newest episode of Ridcully's book review. I hope that, you know, you've had the chance to read the book, and maybe you can explain some of the things that I didn't understand, or point out some of the plot holes that I missed, or just tell me about some of the things that you liked in the book that maybe I didn't talk about. Well, I want to leave you with a thought for the day. Have you ever, you know, just loved somebody so much that you just wanted to lock them away and protect them from the rest of the world? Well, apparently that's kidnapping. Wild Bill.